Okay, well, welcome back to my channel. This is Dan. Um, I have been put into INFJail by the type police. So the big question is, am I really an INFJ? Spoiler, they didn't believe that I am. So I wanted to say, first of all, I really enjoyed the video. I think this was my favorite part.
Why did you not think about this?
Kim, why did you not think about it until just now?
Because I've told you for 4 days we've been talking about
And
this.
I've had work on Saturday afternoon for the whole year. Why am I responsible to think of stuff that you can't think of?
Because I told you last night I was taking the Mini Cooper.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
Kim, you just realized right now, and brought it to my attention, so I just realized it too, that we have a car problem. You just realized it.
Okay, so can you finish your video and come out here and help?
Yes, but do you get my point about it not being okay if you'd be mad at me for not realizing something sooner than you did?
Yes.
Fucking insanity.
So, anyways, back on topic though. So let's hear the verdict.
Sorry, buddy. Highly sensitive or not, good news, we've got a very sensory restrained jail cell for you. We've got low lights, soft sounds,
What'd he do?
mushy food, and
Plenty of partners to overly touch you.
and too much touch Joe is going to be your roommate.
Oh man, it's just censoring this. That's not gonna. It's not gonna go well.
You are not an INFJ, as far as I can tell. You are an ISTJ, probably, but you could be something else. Note the high amount of SI talk in that video, and your example that you provided about the store, going to the store and having a panic attack and blah, 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 having to reorient yourself, stuff like that. That's all very consistent with SI style. You have specific memories and examples that you utilize to explain your situation or whatever. And all that's fine and dandy. ISTJs are great. One of my best friends is an ISTJ, Cameron, and you guys are great. If you're not an ISTJ, then you're something else. But you're, by all I can tell from this 5-minute video, you are not an INFJ. He got locked up for INFJ impersonation.
Okay. So, by the way, I wrote out all of my thoughts on this because I had so many thoughts. So I am going to be reading off of a page. But I will break from what I've written if I come up with any new thoughts, tangential to what I was talking about. But this is going to be my appeal, and I'm doing it because it's fun and I want to see what you guys think, and when you have more information. So hopefully this video will be more interesting than my last one, which I will admit was kind of basic. So I mean, the first thing I want to mention is you were critiquing a performance. I created that video as a performance of what I thought a vlog should be based on approaches I've seen in other vlogs. I thought maybe I could give the format a try. So I created 9 videos like that and shelved them for 6 months because I didn't think I could do it consistently, and frankly I wasn't sure I liked what I had made. I'm still really not sure that I like what I had made. But I tried to create videos that were topical. I'd get an idea and come up with a structure and what I wanted to cover, and then when I hit record, I'd work on staying within the structure I created for myself. I still have no idea if I should be making videos, but a friend of mine suggested I just put one of my videos out there and get feedback. So I've gotten some feedback. Something that's, I think, relevant and worth mentioning is my job. I think I first, let's see, so I'm a UX director, which means I'm focused on the usability and design of interfaces for humans. So I have a very human-centric job where I must put myself into the shoes of my users and see things how they do. NI has been dubbed perspectives, and this is something that comes effortlessly to me. My job requires gathering information from developers, the business, and end users, and then synthesizing that into wireframes, user flows, etc. I eat that shit for breakfast day and night, even when I'm not working. I love putting I love putting pieces together and building a structure out of what was previously a disorganized mess. My job requires a great deal of foresight, predicting how people will use things based on what I have learned about human psychology and interaction design. So, question: am I an SI Dom? The gist of it is, because I was describing SI sensations for 5 minutes, I apparently gave the impression that I'm either an ISTJ or an ISFJ. My relationship with SI is super rocky. My best friend is an ISFJ, and he's so down to earth, and he requires some time to handle unconventional things because they don't line up with what he's always known. And my ISTJ dad is like this too. Contrast with me, though I enjoy structure, I vastly prefer the innovative and abstract. I don't enjoy many of the tasks SI DOMs are known to enjoy, and I'm not traditional. I'd rather spend my days coming up with ideas than focusing on reinforcing old ones, and I do best when there's less information because I can fill in the gaps with my imagination. As I understand it, SI and NI can appear similar in how they manifest, in that they both are inwardly focused. Where they differ is that NI is focused on connecting meanings, where SI is focused on connecting sensory information. I do really poorly when it comes to remembering things I've seen and heard. I think I would make a pretty horrible witness. I could tell you in detail what an event meant to me or how I interpreted it. Or if it's a design, I have backlogged all of the visual aspects of what makes a design good or bad. But I would struggle if it comes to sensory details related to a past event, if that makes sense. I could probably dredge it up, but it's not my go-to. All of that said, I did score high on SI in one cognitive function test I took, so I'm not sure if it's clear to me how strongly I rely on SI in my everyday life, but it might be that I can use it well in some cases. And the next point I want to make is probably why things are a little strange with me in SI, and that's because my dad was an ISTJ, and I picked up a lot of his mannerisms growing up because I had to. He's a pastor, and I had to sit and listen to him preach for 3 hours a week, every week, for my entire childhood. So he was also very particular with English. He always corrected my diction and kind of forced me into a box of his own making. When I wanted to communicate with my dad, I had to use SI because he couldn't talk any other language really to me, or didn't prefer to. So I couldn't engage his feelings, and I couldn't get him interested in my creative pursuits. This video isn't about my daddy issues because I've worked through most of them, but I do think the parallel to ISTJ is interesting. I'm sure there are parts of my personality that I've gotten from him, so that's possibly why that was picked up first. I also want to mention that I do have really developed FI, and of course that was noticed as well. There is an event about my development I need to mention. I have been through a major life change via a divorce at age 29. I'm 37 right now. And through the things I went through, I found a lot of emotional footing internally. At the time, I had a 1 and 3-year-old, and I had to fight to keep custody of them. I realized I had a love I would fight for with every breath I had. So I think it's really interesting that you guys picked up some FI in my video, because I am a lot more focused on my feelings than I previously had been. I think it's worth mentioning imagination. Ever since I was a child, I've created a high volume of drawings, creative writings, poetry, lots of creative expression. My ISTJ dad found no use of these things. I was dubbed a pup in the meadow. So real quick, I'm just going to share some examples from my web portfolio so you can get a sense of my creative work. And I'm going to switch over to screen capture. There we go. This is just the home page of my portfolio. It goes into what I do, creative and UX direction. I've also done a lot of work creating a virtual reality game. I've only gotten chapter 1 done, but it took 3 years. And I'm going to jump around to a few sections to mention. First will be user experience. Here I am conducting a VR UX test with the BBC breakfast in the UK a few years back. But I do a lot of these. I do a lot of user flows, and this is like trying to understand how a product needs to be used by the end user, and then creating that pathway through and all of those decision points. So it's kind of requires a lot of different kinds of thinking, but it's sort of like information gathering and organization. So I'm talking to lots of different parties and trying to understand. I'm trying to understand where everybody's coming from, and then to propose a software flow for the user that will fit with what everybody needs. So this is a situation where FE comes in super handy, because it's very easy for me to understand where everybody's coming from emotionally, and I try to fit that into everybody, into the designs that I do, or the architecture. So I've done a lot of different kinds of architectural design type things in my career in user experience. The next thing I want to show you real quick is art. I've done not only a lot of art, but a lot of art design as well. There's some projects like Life of Lon, which was my VR game, that I directed other artists to do character art, like this. You see, these are different pieces of concept art, as well as like environment art. So these are places that I came up with in my mind, and then wrote about them, and then gave these to a concept artist, and the concept artist created them. So that's how my role to play in this process. I also co-wrote, or co-plotted anyways, a graphic novel trilogy, 660 pages long, but it's a huge project that I've already invested like 5 years into, and it still has probably another decade of work to go into it. So much so that I actually need to create a piece of software to write the script, because there's so many continuity things. I've also done some like vector design, spray paint design, pencil. Let's see, and then going into like web design, I've done a ton of web design, as well as graphic design. Did all of the design for my game, and business cards, websites. I've done promotional stuff. I've done small business stuff, big business stuff, lots of stuff, lots of websites. I've also done a lot with film. Here's a trailer I created. This audio should be coming through. Turn that down a little bit. Whoa. So this will just give you an idea of like the kind of things I enjoy doing. Like most of all, this is where my strengths come in most to play, which is telling a story and like coming up with something very like archetypal and interesting, and then trying to communicate that through art. So this is what I love to do. I've also made like other shorts and films, and done a little screenwriting, made some music of my own, and I've done marketing as well. So that, I wanted to show you that, and then here is the website that I designed for the game, and I had this idea of like the ship would crash as you scroll down, and there's music actually. I should play the music. The music, I co-wrote part of it with a friend of mine. Let's see. There we go. And there is a little piece in here actually in this theme that I wrote. So let me play that part for you here. It's this piano piece here. I don't play piano, but I hummed this out for my friend who was doing the music, and he graciously recorded it. Let's see. It starts right up. There it is. Alright, so you get the idea. So switching back to me, hello again. I just wanted to share that because I think that's maybe will give you a little more context into what I do in my daily life. I don't talk about my five senses in my daily life. I'm pretty disconnected from my five senses most of the time, usually more focused on creativity. So another thing I wanted to mention is I've got a little too much FE, and I've gotten bitten by my over-reliance on FE time and again. When I stayed too long in a relationship that was bad for me because I only wanted harmony. As I got older and developed my FI, I learned how to stick up for my own needs, but that has taken years of work and self-discovery. In fact, I wrote this handy guide for myself, which... like I was having such difficulty understanding my own emotions that I actually wrote out a guide where I wrote each of my own emotions on a page and then researched how to deal with that emotion and then wrote it here. So I have all kinds of things about everything from worrying, stress, possessiveness, feeling overwhelmed, codependency, depression, self-doubt, self-mastery, self-pity, emotional stability, dread, emotional self-harm, fear of abandonment, beating myself up, rejection, feeling sorry for myself, conversing with my subconscious, feeling bad. So these are all things that I have had to, I feel like, learn my own way how to manage these feelings, because though I have developed my FI in recent years, it's not the core of how I deal with things. So I often feel like there's a huge blind spot and it's right here. Like I don't understand my own emotions unless I sit down and I write it all out and categorize it and figure out like what it means. I feel like because I went through this exercise, I have a much better handle on my own feelings than a lot of INFJs I meet. And I made it a priority to improve this about myself. I feel like I balance FI and FE pretty equally now, but when push comes to shove, I'll put my feelings aside for the needs of whoever I'm with. My relationship with SE. I can't say for sure whether I prefer SE to SI because I can see a good case for both. The case for SE is how I decompress. I go out on my balcony and stare at the tree in my backyard. I light my tiki torch candle and I just sit back and let the world pass me by. It's a great place to zone out and let thoughts and ideas come to me, especially enjoyable when it's raining and I can hear the rainfall and smell the smells. So I feel really in tune with sensory experiences. I seek them out when I can. When I need to recover from too much human contact. I notice details of how things look aesthetically. I have to do it a lot for my job. A good-looking design is super satisfying, and I'm really tuned into art and music. I've never known my ISTJ dad and ISFJ best friend to be this way. They never seem to stop and smell the roses like I do, so I think there's at least a contrast in how I go about sensing in my daily life. I generally do tend to slow down and soak all of those sensory things in. That said, having inferior SE, it took me most of my life to learn how to be coordinated, but thanks to a VR game called Space Pirate Trainer, I was able to train that part of myself that had been lacking. So I was really bad with sports in school, things like that. Whereas my dad, the ISTJ, actually was good at sports and loved like weightlifting and all things like that. Also my best friend as well, also pretty coordinated and good with physical activities. Just talking about introverted intuition. I've recorded a few of those videos that I haven't posted on how NI seems to manifest for me, but one thing I can really relate to is being able to visualize an infinite amount of futures. it reminds me of how NA users just have an any dump of like information and ideas, and it tends to happen for me. I feel like that happens internally, and I just have like a million ideas and thoughts of what could happen. I can't help but wander around in my mind 6 months to a year down the road. I actually have plans that go all the way 10 years down the road. I used to really get my hopes up about things because I would come up with these elaborate scenarios, even the absolute worst ones. I have some pretty terrifying worst case scenarios play out in my head. Once I realized this came easily to me, I was able to leverage it in my job and foresee problems before they happen. This has been a boon, and I think it's one of the reasons I found some success in my career. Typically what I do is look at probabilities of which future outcomes are most likely, and then adjust a few things in the present to make my desired outcome more likely. I'll typically measure 10 times before cutting, planning for as many possible outcomes as possible, and building those possible future points into my strategy. This process heavily relies on everything I know about the people I work with and what I think they will do. I also just want to briefly mention this other project that I'm working on. I can't really like show you anything about it because it's technically owned by the company I work for, but I'm working on building a piece of software that I hope can tackle the very real threat of automation that will soon threaten the livelihoods of many people. I think that humanity is on the brink, and technologists and innovators need to hit the gas to invent some new software that can prevent our extinction. So I am trying to solve some problems that I foresee will happen in the next 10 years through software that I'm trying to create. Another thing I want to mention is I created this INFJ careers chart. And it's based on a few years of pretty extensive research into the matter, and because I'm interested in it. I want to know what kinds of jobs are good for INFJs. And other INFJs have validated that I got it right, many even saying I had predicted the careers they are in based on their answers. So I'm going to show you that chart, if I can actually get it to open. So I'm going to switch over that monitor. So this is well, let's see here. Can I zoom out a little bit? Just to show you the whole thing. There we go. You're not going to be able to read it at this size, but so the thing about this chart that I just want to point out is I really centered this around how much human contact the INFJ wants to have, because for me that is really like the core driver behind the biggest decision. And for me, I can occasionally work with people, so I fit into this lower area. But I know other INFJs who love working with people, and I know other ones who prefer to work alone. Some of these people I know personally, some of them I've met online or just talked to in forums. But I will share the link to this in the description below for anyone watching this that wants to see that. I realize creating a chart doesn't mean that I'm an INFJ, obviously, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I really understand the perspective behind the motivations that are common to INFJs, which is you want to do something altruistic, you want to change the world, you want to have your NI engaged all the time, so you want to be always coming up with ideas and being able to find like gaps in information and come up with theories that will fill those gaps, which is I think why INFJs are so good at being therapists, because they can listen to somebody talk and then build a model in their head of what the person is telling them and think about where, just intuitively know where those gaps are in what they're hearing, and then start to probe and like ask questions to get to those dark spots and to try to shed some light on it. I think that's the INFJ like superpower, is being able to talk to people and get down to that nitty-gritty of like what's the core of of who they are, and then when they have a problem, what are those like gaps, you know? And so I really enjoy like exploring those gaps. So the next thing I would mention is a comment that was mentioned about whether I'm bipolar. I am not bipolar as far as I know. I looked up the symptoms and that doesn't fit my life, but I do think it's important to mention that switching back and forth from NI and FE does make me feel a little crazy sometimes because there's such extremes. And I often just kind of tend to find myself being a person of extremes. When I'm in NI mode, I am sort of adrift on an ocean watching my subconscious work, and it's lonely business. But then I get around people and I feel very connected to them, everything they're going through. So I have these vast swings in the sense of connectedness. I go from feeling very connected to very disconnected as I switch back and forth between my own inner world and the outer one with people. Both feel equally vast. So it's easy to feel like I get lost in either one. I could get lost internally, I could get lost in the feelings of other people. So that's why I've had to develop my FI to try to find some kind of like mooring point, because otherwise if I don't know what I want or what my feelings are, I can't represent myself. I can't like in a relationship, I can't say this is what I want. I need to be able to articulate those things. So I've been able to figure that out. Another thing I want to mention is just that finding out I was an INFJ changed my life. I spent 34 years very confused about why I was so misunderstood and why I felt so different from most people I met. I felt bombarded with others' emotions, but didn't understand why or what I could do. I had everyone in my life take MBTI tests, and I studied them relentlessly. I still do. I try to understand every person in my life, and I build a backlog of every person I know of each type so I can compare their differences and similarities and build a better model of MBTI. Because of all this, I started to better understand people, and all of my relationships improved at work and at home. So now I'm trying to help others online because I wish I had all these resources when I was young and struggling with so many things. I'm not an expert on MBTI. I've studied it for 2 years, really relentlessly. I have tons of research. I've taken a ton of tests, which I'm going to share the results of at the end of this video. So I guess the problem, so studying it for 2 years, I guess I know enough to be dangerous, and that can be a problem because sometimes I can misrepresent cognitive functions and how they work, because it's just a matter of like the difference between what you know and you've studied for something for 2 years versus 10 years is pretty vast, you know. So I am trying to learn other models besides MBTI because I want to know where the cracks are, and I want to know like how Jung saw things and then how other, you know, psychologists see things, and really also learn a lot more about the science side of things, which MBTI is really kind of light on science, or using MBTI theory to do some science, which I have done a little bit of that just in my own like research projects. Lastly, my test results. I didn't start with these because I figured if I did, you'd think I was full of shit. It's the cognitive functions that matter, and online tests are often pretty sketch. But I come up INFJ in all of them. I'll include some other tests as well, such as Ocean, just for fun. But I'm going to screen share here with you, and we will take a look. So let's see here. Bear with me. There we go. Whoa, you know which one this is, right? 16 personalities. Okay, so I don't think whether or not this one is credible to you is you can decide that. But I very clearly came out as INFJ in that test. This is another test that I kind of like. It's the sakanorva.net test. Because it gets into like the nitty-gritty of the cognitive functions and how you score and things like that. And here's where so there's I'm going to show you 2 cognitive function tests I took. In general, like you know, as far as like the 4 letters, like that was there was pretty clear like preference for the most part. But when you get up here, that's where things kind of get a little bit interesting, because you can see my high FI right here. If I were an ISTJ, I think I would have a really good grasp of that and handle of that. Here's another one I took, and this is the one that actually had a pretty high SI result, and I thought that was interesting. I also scored higher on FI than I did an FE in this one. This is the one from Living My Purpose. It's a really crappily designed one, but it is really long and extensive, has tons of questions. So I created an account, and I went through the pain in the ass process of answering all those questions. But this is the result that I came up with. And feel free to just pause it at some point if you need to take a look at what these say. And then lastly is my ocean scores, which I think are pretty in line with kind of what you would expect, I think, from an INFJ, which is relatively low extroversion, high compassion, high respectfulness, low trust. I don't know if that's an INFJ thing. High conscientiousness, though, high organization and productivity, somewhat high anxiety, admittedly, and high open-mindedness, as well as like curiosity, aesthetic sensitivity, creative imagination. Similar results in this other ocean score I took, but it had me at low agreeableness versus the high agreeable. Well, a little better than halfway point on agreeableness on this test. And I have to wonder if this trust value is maybe what's causing the number to dip on the other one, and maybe it's factoring that in a bit, because I am a pretty cautious person, and it does take me time to wind up and trust people. But that being said, I am very much swayed by people's plights, and I do connect really well with people emotionally. So that's it. That's all I got. You could tell me if I still belong in the INFJail, or if I can be released, or if I can be put on probation, or whatever you think is permissible. But if I have angered the MBTI gods, and Carl Jung is shaking his fist at me from the great beyond, then my apologies. But if I am an ISTJ, then I'm going to have to reframe my understanding of ISTJ, because everything I know is now wrong, because I have done my best due diligence to study the cognitive functions and understand what the difference between SI and NI are. So it's not to say that I'm not an SI user, or that I can't be adept at it in some cases, but I think, based on everything I've just told you, I think that you will probably agree with me that that my behavior exhibits somebody who prefers to connect meaning together and to understand what everything means, and also to connect to people. And those are really my two driving forces. So I hope that was helpful. But please leave me a comment, and actually, if you want to create another video with your team and talk about this video, it might be kind of long. I'm sorry about that, but I did want to make sure I addressed all the points of why I believe I'm an INFJ, and of course I would welcome your criticism or thoughts on the matter. So thank you very much, and cheers.